Welcome to my humble home.
Yeah, yeah, it is a humble home. Not.
I know. You guys were here in beautiful Cuixmala. It is the property of Alex and Gofredo, and they've made it really kind of a refuge, not just for animals, but for us too, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's been incredible. It's one of the most fantastic places on the planet. It's just, it's hard to even describe without being here. The energetics of the property is just so grounding and calm, but it's also just beautiful. Every minute detail of this place is been thought through.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
And so it does, it kind of gives you a sense of rest and peace. And that's why I thought this would be a good place to start, Luke, in talking about how we can manage to keep our wits about us or keep our sense of peace in the midst of a world that seems to have gone mad. And you're a well-known biohacker, podcaster, a guru on a few different levels. And I just wanted you to share with us some thoughts on what helps you stay grounded when it feels like there's a whirlwind of craziness around you.
I think the number one thing for me is in the awareness of the fact that I'm an infinite being and that this time around on this planet in this body as a me um, is not all there is, so it's always asking my question, is there more? Is there more? What else is there to know about the nature of consciousness? And through meditation, prayer, spiritual study, I've found over the past 24 years or so that over time, and it's been a very slow process for me. I mean, in the beginning, it's like, meditate? Are you kidding me? My mind was so chaotic and fragmented. It was really difficult. But over time, I've gotten to know myself as more than just me in this physical body. And when we're looking at the uncertainty in the world and all of the threats, real or imagined, all of that is much more destabilizing when you see yourself as a finite physical being that's fighting for survival. And so
When you said chaotic and fragmented mind, I thought, how many of us see the world like that? And what if we are kind of projecting that onto it, right? So, in other words, it's not that the world is a certain way, but we're making it a certain way. So, when you find a way to find peace and connecting to God, that helps you kind of make it more what the world should be, or at least what you want it to be.
yeah, I mean, the world that we see is only a projection of our perception and opinions of it. So we can only see things if we're in the linearity, if we're just using the intellect, we can only see things from the narrow perspective of where we are and who we are at any given moment. We lack the vision and perspective to see that what we have in front of us at this given moment is just part of a very long story, right? So say something like the tyrannical behavior of government and the medical system right now, in my perspective. I don't know that what they're doing, which seems to be extremely evil to me, I don't know that what they're doing is bad, in that I don't know what the repercussions of that are going to be. Perhaps the tyranny that is unfolding now in such an aggressive way is going to lead to the next spiritual revolution and the up-leveling of consciousness of all humankind. So who am I to say that this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad? And stepping out of the dualistic perspective and focusing on my internal relationship with myself and with my higher power is the way through. And likewise, when everything's going my way, and I think, here we are at Cuixmala, oh my God, my life is so amazing. Well, how do I know, right? How do I know? Who's the one casting the judgment? It's not the eternal higher spiritual self that's casting judgment as good or bad. It's the intellect, and the intellect is just using programs based on past experience. And so for me, riding the razor's edge of neutrality is really the key, where I step away from attractions and aversions, trying to avoid things, trying to get to things, and just chop wood and carry water. And to someone who's very identified with their mind, that sounds like passivity or compliance or even condoning destructive or harmful behavior of other people. It's like, oh, you just sit there and don't care. No, it's actually care. It's for me the deepest level of caring, and it's caring about my own soul's evolution and well-being and my maturity and the building of karmic merit through good thought, feeling, deed. It's through unconditionally loving myself first and foremost, my relationship with God. And the more I can do that, the easier I find it is to have a more zoomed out, less attached perspective on what's going on in the material world. And I think
yeah, and what happens is, instead of being reactive to circumstances, difficulties, things, whether they're good or bad, you're being proactive so that you're not at the whim and mercy of your situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people right now are feeling particularly victimized, like, I've been told I have to do this, I have to do this, and they're losing themselves in the process. Whether I, on a very specific level, I get elevated because someone praises me, right? Or whether I get discouraged because someone criticizes me. Do you see how I'm suddenly a puppet, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to cut those strings. And I think when you are your most Lukeness, is when the whole is better off. And the same with me. Instead of my being pulled around by other people or circumstances, if I'm the most centered and grounded I can be, then I'm contributing to the greater good and the whole world will work better. That's not too big of an idea, is it?
no, I mean, listen, if we're out there trying to change the world according to what our opinion of how it should be is, I mean, the futility of that is almost laughable. But that's not to say that one doesn't contribute and to be of service. My life is all about service. I mean, sometimes I'm more selfish than I'd like to be, of course. I'm not a saint. Still have instincts and a body and insecurities and the neurosis of just being a human. But to me, it's not the world that needs to be changed, it's me that needs to be changed. And I think that many of us are prone to spiritual bypass by ignoring what's going on in our own consciousness and in our own interpersonal relationships, dealing with our own trauma, our own mental illness in whatever degree that shows up. That it's much easier to project on fixing other people and fixing the world and condemning those that we perceive to be doing things wrong, when really the transformation starts within, and that's when you become a body of light and you're able to pass through experiences and interactions with other people, leaving a positive imprint, footprints in the sand of consciousness, because you're learning now to relate to yourself as more than just a finite being, but rather an infinite being that's having a single expression of consciousness as a you. And then life starts to get really fun. Then reality becomes malleable because we have agency over the perception of any given situation. So, today I woke up and my knee hurts really bad. I think I twisted it a couple days ago. And I was feeling sorry for myself a little bit. What if I want to run on the beach today? It's our last day. And I don't know, perhaps I'll have an interaction like this with you, and maybe someone watching this will just be sparked to just think a little differently, because I'm not running on the beach, I'm here. So who am I to say that having a sore knee is bad, My favorite dictum or spiritual axiom, if I had to pick one, is probably this. It's by Shakespeare, and I don't know anything about Shakespeare other than this. Trust me, I'm not trying to be erudite, but it's just so profoundly true, and that is, there's no such thing as good or bad. Only thinking makes it so.
Oh.
So years ago, for example, I really suffered with a lot of addiction issues, drug addiction, alcoholism. It's been a couple decades now that I've been free of that through a very long story. But one could say, if you looked at me when I was 26 years old and I'm 135 pounds, 6'2", yellow, completely just pathologically ill on so many levels of my being, you would say, God, this is the worst thing that ever happened to a person. It's so sad that this kid, who had so much potential, perhaps ended up like this. And now I perceive that period in my life, which is quite a long period, as being my greatest gift. It's maybe the best thing that ever happened to me, because going through that level of suffering for me, and everyone's suffering it hurts. That your suffering might not be as dramatic as mine might be dramatic as someone else's, but we all experience suffering in the same way and to the same degree, right? But that is what allowed me to have empathy for other people, and to give me the drive to make my life mission to alleviate suffering. And so
I like
that's an
this
example
spirit.
of judging
Yeah.
something as like, oh, this is bad, this happened to you, this is good, that happened to you. Staying in neutral mind like water, and allowing life to unfold and participating in life, but also maintaining the observer-experiencer perspective. So now I'm sitting here talking to you. There's also an awareness that's experiencing this conversation and observing myself and you and what we're doing here from over here, a more broad perspective. And that's the non-judgmental, neutral mind. And now you might say something, or something could happen that I, as a personality, don't like or do like, my preferences.
Yeah.
But that's getting trapped again in the attractions and aversions. I want this, don't want this, don't want this. That's good, that's bad, that's black, that's white. That's where we get entrapped, and that's why it's so easy to be manipulated by those that seek to exploit, subjugate, or control us. Because they know that we're able to be controlled by our emotions, because we're living in that dualistic, lower base nature. That said, it's a practice.
Yes.
Right? I just picked up a book on chemtrails out there on the table, and I'm like, oh my God, we're all going to die, And then it's, I remind myself, Luke, it's a practice, okay? Just zoom out. Maybe that's true. Maybe this book that's terrifying is true, or some part of it's true. But do I want to have a day now in my limbic system, adrenalized and full of cortisol, staring up in the sky, being afraid of chemtrails? No. But maybe I'll tell someone about that book if I find it has some value. Maybe I'll share some of that information with people from the same perspective. Like, hey, there's something going on we might be served to be aware of. Let's look into it.
Right.
But if we look into it out of fear, we lose our power.
Yes, I agree. And I feel like I've been cultivating this myself, a sense of kind of equanimity. Like, I don't need to be, afraid of missing out from that situation, or, anxious because of what I learn it's happening on a bigger picture. Like, I can pay attention to it, understand it, and then kind of lift it up to the light, right? But I have a hard time saying that certain things aren't evil when I see the suffering they cause. And since I'm probably going to be censored anyway, things that begin with a V word, that happen to little children, and that is flooding their body with all kinds of adjuvants and things that are affecting their normal genetic expression and the potential of their lives. How can I avoid calling that evil? That's really hard for me.
Yeah, well, I agree.
Or seeing it as evil.
Yeah, it's. This gets really. this is the line. This is where you cross the line into, like, how much do you trust creator, right? And this is, I think, for those of us that are spiritually oriented, where the rubber really hits the road. It's like, this is the test of faith. How can I reconcile what I perceive to be evil or wrongdoing being perpetuated by this group of people and that group of people, and of course, fearing that, well, if it's happening to them, God, they're going to come after me. But I have to really, and this is just my thing personally, I have to, if I'm going to trust that there is an innate loving intelligence behind all creation, call it God, call it what you will, if I'm really going to feel into that and really surrender my well-being as a person, as a soul, to that all-encompassing consciousness, I can't parcel out, well, this part's God, that part's not God, this is God, that's not God. In the fabric of consciousness, there is only one. There's no separation of a sick kid, a whole kid, a bad politician, a good politician. It's all part of the expression of God, and it seems as though God expresses itself in a multitude of ways. In order for us to incarnate, and have a broad spectrum of contrast in terms of from the lowest levels of base consciousness to the highest levels of exalted consciousness. And as we embody and are given free will, I mean, free will is debatable, right? Because, you only have so much agency, but in terms of being a person and the decisions you make and how you think, how you feel, what you do with this lifetime, we do. And so if we incarnated on a planet or into a world that was utopian and without fault and was pure love, well then what opportunity would we have to evolve? In other words, if your bandwidth of available experience and choices within free will is this angelic realm of pure love where nothing bad ever happens, and we have no choice but to be an archangel saint, and we don't have it within our capacity to rape, kill, abuse, right? Well, then how can we have the experience of elevating? And I know this from my own life of living as a depraved, very injured, traumatized, sad, hopeless drug addict, that I wouldn't want the old me in my life now. I wouldn't hang around the old me. I would not spend any considerable time with the old me. If I met me walking in here, I'd be like, whoa, bad news. Get out of that person's field. But that was my opportunity to go from a very low level of consciousness, because that spectrum exists. I wouldn't say I was ever evil, but I was very selfish and dishonest. I stole, I lied. I mean, I was not a great person in terms of my moral compass. But that enabled me all this bandwidth. And there's still an infinite amount of bandwidth for my consciousness to elevate and merge and get closer to God. So it's like what we perceive to be evil is just a higher degree of separation, perceived separation from God, even though it's all part of God. Then we have a choice to go, I'm disconnected, I'm fragmented, there is separation, and I have the opportunity to merge and get closer to the likeness of creation.
The other thing that comes to my mind is you need friction for a fire to be built, right? So that friction, that difficulty, that perceived evil is something that can cause our growth. There is a verse in Romans that says that God causes all things to work together for good, to those who love him, so that nothing is wasted. And that makes sense if you look at nature, like the little fish is eaten by the bigger fish, that's eaten by the shark, that kind of all is part of a greater ecosystem for the good of the planet. So even though we perceive something as bad, quote unquote, perhaps it's meant to have us grow and challenge us, much like the caterpillar, kind of has to eat all these leaves and get in this chrysalis thing. It might feel uncomfortable, but sooner or later it's going to transform into a butterfly. It can't turn into a butterfly without that process. So that's a little bit of what I hear you saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the contrast of duality is what gives us the rich experience that we have. And it gives us choices, opportunities, right? So in every microsecond, I can move to serve and to give, or I can move to take and reserve out of my own insecurity and fear. And every step we take in one direction or another, every move we make is either in service to our highest self, others, consciousness, or it's in service to the self alone. And when entities embodied are in service to the self alone, we label that as evil, right? Organizations which control and exploit other human beings and perpetrators of all types, right? And so it's not that the perpetrator of what we call evil is evil. They actually are just unaware of and unconscious of the field of love. It's like when today, it's a little cloudy day here, it's normally very sunny, right? So when the clouds obscure the sun, we think that there's no sun, so we have to get some sun and put it there. No, we just have to remove what obscures the sun's warmth, and that's the clouds. And so those that we would consider evil are just obscured by clouds. There's something within their nature that blocks them from having compassion, empathy, love, understanding, the ability to put themselves in another's shoes and not want to inflict harm on them, because they would have the knowledge that they're doing it to themselves simultaneously. right? That there's an interconnectedness, that we're all one in terms of the fabric of consciousness. So if one is an evil perpetrator, the only thing that's happening is their ignorance, willingly or not, of the fact that to harm you is to instantaneously harm myself. It's like if you hated your big toe and I'm going to kill my big toe with a sledgehammer, being ignorant of the fact that it's part of who you are and what you are, right? So when I look at, a George Soros or a Bill Gates, any of these demagogue, cartoonish, evil characters, they really are, they're Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. I mean, they're so perfectly playing their part as entities that are disconnected from their true nature and are obscured from the light of God through their own experiences or their own misunderstandings of the nature of reality and the nature of what humanity is capable of. And they're acting out of some perceived separation from God, and therefore seek to harm and exploit other humans, depopulate the planet, whatever their agenda is that we would deem as evil, and then that will bring out the part within ourselves that sees us as separated. We want to punish and kill and torture them because they're the bad guys. Well, who are we then? But the key, and I'll just, I know you want to say something, but
that's fine.
It's
I always want to say something.
Yeah, me too. I think I talk a lot when I'm interviewed because I'm always interviewing other people, and I'm like, I just have to sit there sometimes. So the difficult thing. The difficult hurdle that people have in viewing someone like that is if I'm going to unconditionally love all of reality and all of God's creation, including a Bill Gates and a George Soros, does that mean that I allow them to remain empowered and that I don't do anything to stop them? Do I just condone their harming of multitudes of people in the family that we call humanity? And absolutely not. Love is also a fierce love, and out of love, the mother bear will kill to protect cub. That's love also. So love has within it justice. Love has within it protecting the weak from harm. Love has within it the ultimate strength and power. And when it comes to us feeling disempowered because of what's going on in the world right now, and you could have taken the Great Depression and asked them about what we're going through, they'd be like, you got no problems, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
Any, the Holocaust, you could name a million things in recorded history where people have had it worse. Here we are sitting in Cuixmala, right?
I know.
And not everyone's sitting in Cuixmala, but to put things in perspective, we're doing okay. And what gives us the capacity to know that we're okay now, regardless of what our external circumstances appear to be, to the contrary, is that eventually, throughout all the cycles of the human theater, we're going to be up and we're going to be down. And what gives them, if we want to name a them, control, is our caving to our lower nature and our fear, and our caving to the hatred of those who hate. And that's what we see in a lot of social movements now. Is when the Orange Man was in office, it was like, we hate him because he hates. Right? It's like,
yes.
How is that going to be effective at eliminating hate? You hate more because who can hate more now? We're in a hate competition.
Escalation.
Yeah, or we're in what's very common is a victim who is the most subjugated contest. I'm the most oppressed contest, right? And so through this micro separation of all these seemingly divisible attributes or categories that we put ourselves in as people, are like micro-tribalism. Each micro-tribalism is competing for the biggest victim. And that's not where justice comes from. Justice doesn't come from revenge. Justice comes from self-empowerment and unconditionally loving yourself and others and doing no harm whenever possible, right? And so, is it difficult for me to love a Bill Gates? Very difficult. But if I zoom way out, I see, he's just perfect. He's a perfect villain.
Mm-hmm.
And God bless his soul, because the decisions he's made in this lifetime to harm humanity in the ways that he has, I don't need to punish him. No one needs to punish him. His punishment is held within his deeds, and there is, woo, man, I I don't need to participate in that at all. I don't know how I know, but I just know people that incarnate and make decisions to behave in those ways. Justice is served and will be served. I don't need to do anything about it. So what can I do? I can actually, without condoning one's behavior, see that soul and truly have compassion for them for what they've done to themselves.
Yes.
And
remember the story I told you of the pirate?
Yeah.
I read this in Thich Nhat Hanh's Pieces Every Step.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know, on the South Seas, there was this pirate. This is a true story. And they would pillage villages and take the young women and, make them concubines or whatever on their boat. And one young woman, she was like 12 or whatever. She couldn't stand her life anymore. And she threw herself into the sea to drown herself. And he said, a lot of us hearing that story feel for the young woman. But we have to remember that if we were in the shoes of that pirate, raised as he was with whatever circumstances, we are also the pirate, So to me, that gives me compassion. And it's true what you said when we see some of these people as cartoonish. And I think that's our way of kind of dehumanizing them. So I think it's important to remember that they are also made in God's image. And to kind of, what I try to do, I can only really confess my own sins, or the things that are clouds that limit my view of God and my understanding of love and light. But I can also lift people like that up to the light, so that who knows on what level, prayers for people that like Jesus said, pray for your enemies, prayers for people I don't even know, but whom are maybe making a negative impact on society, I can lift them up. And who knows in which ways that's going to change them or change my perception of them, maybe even, right?
Yeah. I think there are some keys here that are helpful, because I'm a born rebel. I mean, like I was a teenager, I was a punk rocker. I mean, I do not like authority. I'm at my core, or my immature core, an anarchist. Just burn it all down. Fuck this, So I get it. I get it. I'm not some passive hippie that's just like love and light. No, but with some understanding and some experience and working through so many of my own demons, I know what works and what doesn't work. It's just pragmatic. So as I'm working my way through what appears to me to be tyrannical overreach, this totalitarian tiptoe that's just charging in, and I'm no history buff, but I do know enough about history to understand that when a totalitarian regime moves in and devastates a country or a continent or large groups of people, this is how they do it, right? And so you just kind of have to look at the past and go, okay, first they do this, then they, free speech, disarmament, et cetera, right? False flags.
Banishing gatherings.
Yeah. Stopping religion, burning the books, all that.
Yeah.
And so when I look at that, it's like, I feel my body tense up, but then there goes my power. Now I'm giving my power to a very small, relatively speaking, group of people that may or may not ever even get to me or any of my loved ones, right? I mean, maybe by the time all this plays out, I'll be living in Texas, and it'll all just blow over, and there'll be a third political party will emerge in the United States, and we'll get rid of the swamp and, get rid of all the baddies, and we'll have this utopian thing, which is very unlikely. But perhaps we'll, over the
what
vast...
good does it do you to be afraid of something that hasn't happened yet?
Yeah.
That's part of your point, right? When everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is coming down the pike. I'm like, are you sure? And why are you afraid now? Why don't you wait until it comes?
Well, this is, I think so many of us have kind of become... the power of now, right? The book and just the concept. So many of us have become kind of, oh yeah, we know about that, the now. But truly, in this micro moment, nothing is wrong and nothing's ever wrong. What we appear to be wrong is always about to happen. So right now, you pull a gun out and you put it to my head. I'm fine. Everything's fine. The body's going to be terrified. The nervous system's terrified. You cock the gun. I'm fine. Everything's great. You pull the trigger. I'm gone in this body. Everything's great.
Oh my gosh, that's an interesting
You
way
know,
of
in,
thinking of
in
it. I hadn't thought
every
of that like that before.
in every 10,000ths of a second, you are safe. Because what you are is not what you, and I mean you, anyone, me included,
Yeah.
of course, is not what you think you are. So no harm can actually come to you as an energetic being. The harm we do to ourselves by what happens with. I mean, I looked right before we talked, I looked in one of the Telegram groups I'm in, and it's like they're imprisoning everyone at the Canadian border. When you fly in, they're throwing you in a gulag, basically, you know? And it's like, I'm like, oh, what if they do that in California when I fly back? And it's like, that's a fantasy.
Right. Uh-uh.
That's actually not happening. What's happening is I'm in one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth, having an amazing conversation with you, another awakened, beautiful being. But I could be having that same experience sitting in prison.
Right. Absolutely.
You see what I mean?
That's the beauty of the human spirit.
It's within the mind.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that it wouldn't be more challenging, of course.
But
right?
if people can be happy, and they have been recounted stories of being happy in a concentration camp, you know, how are we imprisoning ourselves in our own minds, and why are we not able to be at peace? I think part of the key is what you said a moment ago. We're afraid of what's going to happen to these meat suits, as a friend of mine calls it. We forget that there's more to us than meets the eye. We don't have to be afraid of death, you know? But I think that's driving a lot of what's happening. I want to wear a mask because I'm afraid I'm going to catch something and die. Or I want to get a shot because I don't want to get something and die. It's like, is that the worst thing that could happen? You know?
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, the kind of the trick of being born in a body. You know, we have the animal body, and the animal body is wired to survive.
Yes.
And so it seems to me the mastery that we have the opportunity to evolve into is to acknowledge and respect the animal body and its desire to keep us alive, and some of the very foolhardy things it does to ensure that we stay alive. You know, acting from your instincts through greed and all of the betrayal that humans perpetuate on each other, just out of that greediness, not even just greediness for money, but just greed of like, I gotta get mine, I'm gonna die. You know, and to acknowledge the body and its tenacity, and the mind and its tenacity, how it schemes and scams and calculates and is just constantly running to make sure that you don't die. And it's a really interesting experience to be embodied as consciousness into a physical form. And then it's almost as if we spend our lives in a way at war with the physical form, and all it's trying to do through the ego, personality, and the intellect, it's just trying to keep this goddamn vehicle alive so that our soul can complete the mission here, whatever that happens to be. And so what I've found to be very helpful is actually in making peace with the ego and with that chattering mind that is programmed to find fear, and even the biochemical processes of the mind, of the limbic system, and this shooting out of the cortisol and the adrenaline and the fight or flight response, the nervous system, how our bodies are this antennae for fear, and we're always feeling out to see how we can survive, and to be at battle with that part of our nature is not only frustrating and painful, but it's also futile. It's ineffective. So it's like, oh, how can I then just be in love with the fight or flight and go, oh, there you go, good job, oh, good job, and snap out of it. You know, I think that the trap for many spiritual seekers is wanting to become this exalted, enlightened being where we're never triggered, and we're beyond the
floating above the earth, kind of.
beyond the you know, the confines of the nervous system and our biochemistry and the intellect, and that we can somehow divorce ourselves from that, and then we'll find freedom. And so we're at war with that. And I think it's in the gradual mastery of actually integrating all parts of ourselves and making the ego our friend. I mean, God, if I didn't have an ego, I wouldn't shower. I wouldn't do the work that I do, right? I would be so humble that I would never want a camera on, and I would just probably be a renunciate living in a cave somewhere, and perhaps uplifting humanity through the energy field created by that single point of consciousness as it reverberates into the ethers. But I wouldn't be out as a householder doing my work without some sort of personality and a desire to be liked at times, and knowing what's funny and what's not funny and all of those things that make you who you are as an individual person. So why fight it? It's just, I think the wiser, well, for me, the wiser approach is to embrace all of that. It's like I was just having some body work done, and my mind was extremely active in the first bit because I just drank a huge coffee, probably. And it wasn't negative. It was just like just planning, doing mind things. And for a minute, I thought, this is annoying. Like, maybe mind, could you let me just relax? I want to go into theta and just chill. And I was very like high beta, creative ideas, great things. And I think without even consciously doing it, I just accepted that's what the mind wanted to do. It wanted to process and think about the moving company, next week, and just all this stuff. It was actually doing some really good work. It decided to do it when I hadn't planned on it doing it. I was laying down to relax, going to theta dreamland, and sacrocranial. What's it? Craniosacral.
I always forget those. I do too.
Yeah,
I always get those backwards.
I need to get a tattoo of it. I have a hard time remembering.
Is it sacrocranial?
Craniosacral.
Okay.
Yeah, the cranium first.
Okay.
But that's what needed to happen. So it's like, oh, thank you, mind. I love you. Thank you for being so busy. You're working so hard. Good job. And also, I talk to my mind, and then sometimes I say, hey, thank you. You're doing a great job up there. But there's no need to be tense. It's all going to work out. You just thank you for doing your job, and now you can just relax. I didn't do that today. It just kind of subsided. Yeah. But it's the war within ourselves that many of us have a difficult time mastering, and then we want to go at war with them. It's like I always say, hi.
It's okay.
Maddie's trying to get it.
I know.
It's like we want to go at war with the world, and the geopolitical system, and we can't even get along with our brother, our mom, our son.
Somebody told me there was a saying in the 60s, like, before you go out and change the world, take care of your own backyard, And I really think that's kind of the crux of how to find yourself grounded when everything around you is swirling like a hurricane. You can be in the eye of the storm, right? If you reconnect with yourself, with God, find a space. And I really like your sense of humor with yourself when you say you take a big step back and don't get uptight about your feelings or how your brain is operating or your body or your personality. Just observe it. And I think that's the beginning of awareness, more of a mindfulness, and an ability to find the peace and the beauty right where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and also for me, I have to give myself a lot of slack when I fail to do that, right?
Yes.
And I'm reactive or impatient or I do become afraid or try to punish someone with a little passive-aggressive comment or whatever my shortcomings are, is to just be kind to myself and know that I'm making progress. And if I do find myself getting triggered into fear or being reactive, it's not about not allowing that to happen or suppressing that. For me, it's about how fast can I get back into homeostasis, and it becomes a game.
Yeah.
Alice and I play this game all the time, my fiance. We have a very peaceful relationship. I didn't even know it was possible to be this compatible with someone where you just, I don't know. I think we both done a lot of work on ourselves. It makes it easier. And we have suffered at our own hand in many ways and have found our way together. But, we get, just like any couple, we get annoyed with each other. And I don't see we get in an argument, but we get pissed at each other sometimes. And it's not even that we've talked about it that much. We've reflected on it. That's interesting. Look, we're not going to be super pissed for a minute. But rather than condemning myself for getting super pissed because my mind has told me something about her situation that's not true. It's always something that's not true.
Right,
the mind's like,
she,
and it's like, once you cool down, you're like, actually, I was the one that, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You take responsibility for your part in it. But it's amazing. We're able to get back to center so fast most of the time. It's like I keep being surprised by that. Aren't we supposed to be fighting for 3 days now? And I sleep in the other room, and we scoff at each other, and we walk by, and we're huffy puffy, stomping around, and it's like, why suffer?
Right.
Just allow the expression of that feeling, like, I'm pissed. God, I'm pissed off.
Right.
You really hurt me.
Yeah.
So I think I hurt me because of what I told myself about what you said or did, and really, really getting honest with oneself. But being triggered is great because then you know, okay, I'm still human. Now, how fast do I get back to love? In the airport, that's my biggest trigger. You know, when we landed here, and I'll end with this, but we landed here in Mexico, and I just, with the masks, and we had just very, very aggressive flight attendants, you know, really getting off on, I perceived that they were getting off on their minuscule level of authority with the masks and all this stuff. And we land, and I'm hot. I get all this stuff out, which I do to myself. I put, I have my biomat and my EMF shit and all this stuff in my seat.
Did you bring your X3? I was just wondering.
No, I didn't actually. I didn't bring that. I normally do, but anyway, I have all this stuff on the plane. So when I got off the plane, I always have my own pillow. I have all this shit, and then I threw it in this pillowcase, and where we had to walk across the tarmac, there was no Skygate, and I'm all hot and frustrated, and then they want to see our paperwork with the things, and oh my God, I just wanted to murder someone, and I'm down, I dropped all my shit, and then right behind me, some huge dog that I thought was a police dog, just by the sound of it, right behind me, and my nervous system just went into complete fight or flight freak out, and I could have murdered someone. I was so enraged.
Oh my gosh.
Now, the old me would have been like, see, you're not spiritual. Oh, you're a meditator? Look at you now, asshole. And I just looked at myself and I went, wow, you're a basket case. This is amazing. How fast can you get back? How fast? Let's play a game. How quickly can you get back into your center, into who you really are? And it took a few minutes. It took a few minutes because then there was more lines and customs, and
still hot.
I was probably pissed off and annoyed for a good 30 minutes, which is a long, long time for me. That was a tough one because all my triggers, dogs are a huge trigger. I've had a lot of trauma with dogs, etc. But I used to live in a world where I was in that triggered state almost all day, almost every single day. I was just completely psychotic. So, if every few months I lose 30 minutes to my base nature, okay. But what a gift it is to be able to, most of the time, 5 minutes, I'm like, no, I'm not doing this.
Right.
I'm not going there. There is no reason to go there because I know the truth is that I'm telling myself a story that's not true, and now I'm reacting to that story. Let me get honest with myself, take responsibility for what I've done to help perpetuate this upset, if I have, which I usually have, had some degree of participation in it. How fast can we get back? And I think for all of us that are in one way or another suffering with what's going on in the world right now, it's like, cool, can I check the news feed and then just leave it alone and go back to life? And if I can't do that, maybe leave the news feed alone for a while. I took 2 weeks off. It was the best thing I ever did.
It can be an energy suck, right?
Oh yeah, it's fear porn. It's fear porn. It's so addictive because the limbic system is like, oh, there's a threat. Let's find out more about that threat. And then you're going into the chemtrails, you're going into the 5G, you're going, into the pedophilia, and it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
If you didn't have access to that information, and I'm not advocating for being completely ignorant of what's happening in the world, because it's difficult to be effective and participate in a way that's constructive if you have no clue. But it's interesting to see when you just turn off media, everything's beautiful and fine. Like there's actually nothing wrong,
right? Except
when you peep back into the extreme levels of duality and polarity that we're experiencing. So I think all of these times give us each an opportunity to go within and build that tenacity, to build that courage, the bravery, the acknowledgement of how difficult it is to be a human being. I mean, it really is. Everyone has, some lives are on the surface easier, some more difficult. But anyone that's here and you're still breathing, you are a fucking warrior. This is not easy, and it's especially not easy to be here and to truly commit yourself to spirituality and walk the path, however imperfectly. Because the way of spirituality is the exact opposite of spiritual bypass. True spirituality is facing the depths of your own shadow, facing the shadow of the world at large in our experience and transmuting it using spiritual tools, spiritual principles. That's really hard because so much of our programming is the antithesis of that. Our programming is stay in a body. You are only a physical being. You're going to die.
Yeah.
You know, it's like working up and out of that is what makes life interesting for me. And it's what wakes me up in the morning. It's like, ooh, how much closer to the truth can I get today? The truth of who I am and the nature of reality.
Wow, your words are really encouraging to me. I chose for 2021, I always choose a word for the year, and my word for this year was courage. And I was picturing myself needing courage to face everything that's out there, but maybe I also need courage, obviously, to face what's in here, you know, and to continue growing and taking that path that's not as well traveled, but is ultimately very rewarding and will lead to my growth. So,
Amen.
I appreciate what you have to say, brother.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate you, Luke.
Thank you. You too.